Hey there and welcome back to NBA 2K18's My League Mode. My name is Pete and today we complete the first part of this year's offseason with the Louisville Legionnaires. In the previous two off-seasons our focus was primarily on the draft, and this year though we're also having a closer look at free agency. Before we start things off, however, I have a quick announcement to make. If you have watched the latest channel update video, then you already know what I'm talking about, because there is now an official Pete Complete Patreon. So if you want to support the channel or find out more, you can go to patreon.com/PeteComplete. You should also be able to find the link on screen right now, as well as down below in the description and at the end of the video. Now, let's get back to business. The offseason is right around the corner and there's really nothing else we can do but to jump right into it, so let's kick things off with player retirement. This year's class is admittedly not the most high-profile one. Next to Tyson Chandler and Richard Jefferson, the biggest name on the list here is arguably Dwyane Wade, who retires from the Chicago Bulls after spending 16 years in the league. Very fittingly, he does so in the same year as Chris Bosh, who I had already edited down to an overall of only 40, because 2K still had him on the roster as an all-star caliber player, while in the real NBA he is unfortunately far removed from that. Dwyane Wade, however, then remains the only player inducted into the Hall of Fame. A bit sad to see Chris Bosh get snubbed here, but Wade has definitely earned the honors. Wade is then also the only player this year who gets his jersey retired, not by the Bulls however, instead by the team that he spent most of his career with, the Miami Heat. Moving on, we now have the league meetings ahead of us, where potential rule changes are established. This year, however, almost everything stays the same. We are thankfully not getting rid of the luxury tax, we also have no changes to contracts for older players, and we are also not getting rid of the 8-second rule to advance the ball to the front court. Now, one thing the league would like to do this year is a change to the draft lottery. This change would reduce the number of lottery teams from 15 down to only 7, and in my opinion, it's a horrible idea. Realistically, such a change would incentivize tanking even more, with the competition for the first overall pick being drastically reduced. It would also further penalize bad teams that are trying to improve but are still not there yet, as their formerly slim chances of landing a top pick are now being reduced to 0. So all in all, I don't really think this change would make a whole lot of sense, especially now that the league has 2 more expansion teams as well, which mathematically alone already decreases the percentage of teams who actually make it into the lottery. So we will override this change and reject it as well, and the last point here regarding bonus free throws and overtime will also be rejected. So no rule changes this season, and with that we can move on to league realignment. And here things also remain the same, no team moves over to a new division or conference, and the Legionnaires remain in a stacked central division with the reigning champions from Cleveland. Now up next we have the draft lottery. We haven't really talked about this year's draft class yet, but don't worry, that will happen soon. The main 2 reasons behind that are that 1, the class is a fairly weak one, and 2, unless we make a trade, we're not going to pick anywhere near the top. We do have a second first-round pick this year from New York, but the Knicks also finished the season as a playoff team, which is why with that pick we are only up at spot number 20. Our own pick then falls to 26, so neither one of those picks will likely allow us to take anyone who can contribute right away. And to be honest, with the way things have gone last season, I don't think we're in desperate need for even more young talent. Currently projected to pick first overall are the Dallas Mavericks, by the way, who already had the first overall pick last year. As a result of that pick, by the way, I have moved Dennis Smith Jr. over to the shooting guard, where in this roster he actually gets a small 1-point rating increase and opens up the point guard spot for Grant McLeod. The second overall pick is currently projected to go to the Las Vegas Aces, and if everything sticks to the plan, then pick number 3 will go to Orlando. Now, whether or not any of that actually happens is what we'll find out next, and because we don't really have a stake in the lottery, we're quickly going to simulate it. Alright, quite a few surprises here, as the first overall pick actually goes to Detroit. They were only projected to pick 7th, so this right here definitely a lucky draw for them. The same can be said for the Los Angeles Lakers, who were projected to go 5th and have now jumped up to the 2nd pick. And so the Mavericks, Aces and Magic all miss out on their projected picks, picking 3rd, 4th and 5th respectively. And as you can also see here, the Legionnaires with picks number 20 and 26. Now we have the Combine, the workouts and the NBA draft coming up, but first of all we have to take care of staff signing. Or we would have to if any of the contracts here actually expired. Our head coach is currently in the final year of his 4-year contract, and yes, in Greg Popovich and Michael Stauffer there are very good candidates available here, but realistically I don't think it would be fair to let our head coach Jake Thomas go in the last year of his contract, especially not after all he has achieved last season. Should we actually manage to get a superstar caliber player on board during the offseason, then we could of course have another look at the head coach position. For the moment though, I think Jake Thomas has earned himself job security. Also, with just over $4 million remaining in the budget for this position, we wouldn't really be able to pay any of the top tier candidates anyway. So moving on, it is now the day of the draft combine, and I would say this is a good point to take a first closer look at this year's draft class. Like I said, it's not the most spectacular one, but there are a few intriguing players in there. Currently projected to be picked first overall is Deshaun Stephens, a point guard from Syracuse. I would probably call him the most NBA-ready player in this class. He is crazy athletic, has a fantastic drive to the rim, a great ball handler and a very good defender as well, and his jump shot is solid, although nothing spectacular. Stephens' ceiling is somewhat limited by the fact that he's already 23 years old, and also by the fact that our scout currently estimates his potential rating at an 85, which is good but probably won't make him a superstar. Still, teams looking for an NBA-ready point guard won't find anyone better this year. Moving on, projected to go second overall is small forward Jamin Sheridan. Standing 6'9" tall from Ohio State, Sheridan is most comfortable in his role as a super athletic defender, one who can safely be classified as a raw prospect. His scoring abilities are currently not the most well developed, but our scout has his potential at a high 88, he's also only 19 years young, and especially on defense he should be able to defend multiple positions right away. Now those two are the consensus top 2 picks. After that the quality of this draft class drops off quite a bit. Currently projected to go third overall is power forward Juwan Freeman from Connecticut, who stands out a bit at the power forward due to his above average passing abilities, but who apart from that is also once again mostly an athletic defensive minded player. His estimated potential rating by the way is an 83. Darnell Gadsden, then another player who brings some very good defense to the table, but for a change also one who can reliably score the ball. Gadsden is a very good shooter and finisher at the rim, however he is not the most athletic guy at the shooting guard, and his potential is only estimated to be a 76, so it remains questionable how much he can actually develop. Gadsden, by the way, a Kentucky product, the same as his teammate Al Steele. At only 18 years old, Steele is the youngest player in the top 5, although in terms of his potential he shares a few of the concerns that we already talked about with Gadsden. Steele's potential is slightly higher, but our scout still has him below 80, which will likely make him good enough to be a competent starting caliber player, but it remains to be seen whether or not he can be more than that. His skill set is that of a scorer with a focus on stretching the floor. For a big man, Steele has a fairly good outside shot, but his post game isn't too bad either. And now we have already reached the last guy that I think is worth mentioning, 23-year-old shooting guard Ron Foster from Baylor University. This guy's skill set is quickly described. He's a straight-up sharpshooter, very quick on his feet, but apart from that, rather one-dimensional. Also, once again, a projected potential rating below 80, so we're likely not going to see him turn into an all-star. The low potential is then actually a trend that continues throughout the rest of the class. There are really only a handful of players who even have a potential rating above 80. The majority of the lottery picks are in the low to mid 70s, so while there are a few interesting players in this draft class, I wouldn't bet anything on one of them turning into a superstar. That of course makes it a bit easier for us to swallow that we only pick in the late first round, but we'll get to that in due time. Up next, we now have the draft combine, and as part of that we are now also being informed of any medical concerns, but none of them affect any of the top prospects. Richmond here is projected to go in the very late first round, while McCoy will likely be selected in the late second, but chances are that he might not be drafted at all. The results of the combine then pretty much confirm what we already know, as we see Deshaun Stephens here near the top in the 3/4 sprint, and also ranked first with an insane 43-inch vertical. The 350-pound monster big man Jamal Baxter then without a doubt the strongest big man in the draft. Interesting to see here though, point guard Jack Perkins ranking as the only non-center in the top 5. Also fairly unsurprising are the shooting results, where Ron Foster dominates the standing threes, while Gadsden has the edge on the moving threes. Now the next few days will once again allow us to get a few more workouts in, but then we will be moving on to the draft, and that is where we are in a bit of a pickle. Now, as you might remember from the previous episode, this offseason could be a very interesting one. 2 superstars who played college basketball right here in Kentucky are on the lookout for new contracts, and those 2 guys go by the names of Anthony Davis and Demarcus Cousins. Now, neither one of them will accept anything less than a max contract, and that actually has fairly serious implications on our ability to draft anyone. Should we only sign our 2 first-round picks, we would commit an additional $6 million in rookie salaries. That might not seem like a lot, but it is actually enough to change our strategy significantly. If we don't sign anyone in the draft, we will save the money, of course, and then in order to offer something in the range of a max contract, we would only have to get rid of roughly $10 to $11 million. And conveniently enough, that is exactly the kind of salary that Skal Labissière makes next season, who with the addition of either Davis or Cousins would see his role fairly reduced anyway. However, if we do sign only a single rookie, that whole scenario would no longer work, and to make things work in the offseason we would then have to trade an additional player next to Labissière while not taking on any additional salary in return. The thing is, we don't really have that many expendable players on the contract to begin with, and I also don't want to shake up the roster entirely just to make room for one new player. Still, probably the most significant problem in this scenario comes from the fact that the draft takes place before the free agency. Because only in free agency do we actually get a look at what other teams offer Davis and Cousins, and so only in free agency can we make a well-informed decision of whether or not we can match those offers. Especially in the case of Davis, he might very well receive a 5-year Supermax offer, and even with player options and no trade clauses we would have a hard time keeping up with that. So considering the fairly weak draft class, our late position in the draft and the overall implications on free agency, here is what we're going to do. We are going to trade both of our first-round picks this year to Miami in exchange for an unprotected first-round pick from the Heat 3 years down the line. This is admittedly a little bit of a risky move for the Heat because there are absolutely no protections on the pick, however, I think the Heat are desperate enough to make the move. The simple reason for that, for the next 2 seasons the Miami Heat do not have a single draft pick. Looking at their roster though, they could very well use one, as a lot of their core players are still very young, most notably Justice Winslow, Marvin Bagley and Bam Adebayo. At the same time, the Heat also have a number of aging veterans on the team that they should look to replace sooner or later, players for example like Goran Dragic or James Johnson. One more issue for the Heat is the cap space situation, because with team options on Bagley and Adebayo, as well as with Johnson and Olynyk likely opting into their player options, they won't really have a whole lot of cap space available. Their number one priority this offseason is therefore likely going to be to re-sign Hassan Whiteside, for which they could go over the cap using Whiteside's bird rights. Bringing in another valuable free agent would be completely out of the question for them then, which is why adding players in the draft is probably the best idea for them. That, however, is only possible if you have picks, which is exactly why I think the Heat should be interested in ours. Especially considering the fact that the Heat finished dead last in the Eastern Conference this season, I would say they should be more than happy to get a chance to grab a few more young players, and a first-round pick 3 years down the line with a young core that is hopefully improved by then should be a fair price to pay. And the Heat seem to agree with that reasoning, they accept the trade offer, and with that we just got rid of both of our first-rounders. Now that still leaves us with our 2 second-round draft picks. Both of them originally belonged to other teams, one to the Las Vegas Aces and the other one to the Phoenix Suns. And with these 2 we are going to repeat the process, we are going to trade both of those picks to Memphis in exchange for the Grizzlies second-rounders in 2022 and 2023. The reasons behind this move are fairly similar to the ones behind the move we did earlier. Once again, the Grizzlies do not have a single pick this year, but they could definitely use a few young talents. With the aging veterans Conley and Gasol still on the roster, the Grizzlies finished fairly low in the West this season. Only 3 teams were worse than them. Big difference though, all 3 of those teams actually have draft picks. Now, the 2 second-rounders here are probably not going to change the Grizzlies' future significantly. Still, they're better than nothing, and in my opinion worth giving up 2 picks in the future. And once again, our trade partners seem to think the same, and with that we have now successfully moved all 4 of our draft picks this year. That now also means we can skip the pre-draft workouts and jump right to the draft results. Alright, we had no big trades during the draft, and the order of the top picks here also doesn't really surprise. The Pistons select point guard Deshaun Stephens with the first pick, and it now remains to be seen how that affects the rest of their offseason, because I believe their current point guard, Reggie Jackson, is becoming a free agent. With the second pick, the Lakers then have the easy choice of selecting Jamin Sheridan, who should fairly soon be able to compete for the starting small forward job against Brandon Ingram. The Mavericks then grab 18-year-old Al Steele at the power forward, a good move in my opinion, they're not super stacked at that position. The Aces then also pick up a power forward, and just like in the Mavericks case, Freeman is a very good fit at that position. Darnell Gadsden then drops to the Magic at number 5, where he will likely come off the bench behind shooting guard Evan Fournier. Those are the top picks. Apart from that, no real surprises. Those 5 are probably the players we should keep a close eye on next season, but over the course of the next few episodes we will see who else emerges from this rookie class. So, with the draft behind us and not a single rookie added to the Legionnaires, we can now move on to the team and player options. And the choices here are fairly easy. We will of course bring back Mohamed Bamba, there is no question about it. However, we will decline the team option for Derek White. If we want him to come back, we should be able to re-sign him for cheap in free agency, and offering the team option here would only complicate the process should we actually decide to go after Davis or Cousins. The same logic then applies to the qualifying offers as well, which is why we're not going to extend one to Devin Reed or Diamond Stone. In the case of Stone, that is admittedly a bit unfortunate. After his potential increase from the G League, I would have loved to bring him back, but this is a small sacrifice that we have to make, and we might still get a chance at him in regular free agency. And regular free agency, that is what's up next. More specifically, the 3-day moratorium period, where the teams can already offer a few contracts and come to early agreements with some of the more interesting free agents. And for us, the most interesting players are the 2 at the top of the list here, Anthony Davis and Demarcus Cousins. Now this right here is the moment of truth. Now we will see whether or not we can compete in the bidding process. Even with all of the precautions we have taken so far, we will be a bit limited in what we can offer. So let's start with Davis and see what kind of offers he has on the table. Alright, very interesting. Both the Pelicans and the Pistons have offered him a contract. The Pistons apparently not going after Andre Drummond just yet, and the situation here is definitely interesting, since both offers are fairly attractive, but we can also see there is room to improve. Going through the numbers here, I think we should be able to offer something a bit more attractive, but before we focus exclusively on Davis, let's also have a look at Cousins. Okay, Cousins received 3 offers here, 2 from his former teams, the Bulls and the Kings, and both of those fairly good in terms of the salary, and with the early termination options here, they should interest Cousins as well. The Las Vegas Aces then also made their bid with a 4-year offer, but that doesn't seem to interest him all that much. So all in all, I think we can at least compete for Davis, maybe even for Cousins as well. So in the next step, we will have a look at our cap holds. We have 6 of our upcoming free agents listed here, who all have cap holds based on their previous contracts, and all of those cap holds count against our salary cap. Those cap holds pretty much work as placeholders, and they reserve a bit of cap space should we want to sign those players in the future. However, for the majority of the guys here, we don't want to do that, especially not for the amount of money that is reserved. And that is why in one swift move we are going to remove all of the cap holds here. This now leaves our salary cap room at $22.44 million, which we could now increase to roughly $33 million by trading away Skal Labissière. That move, however, as well as the contract offers to Davis and Cousins, all of that will happen in the next episode. In today's episode, I think we have built ourselves the perfect base to go after a big-name free agent for the first time, and so in the next episode we will see whether or not our plan succeeds. In the meantime, as always, if you enjoyed the episode, then I would be happy if you could leave a thumbs up. And if you want to support the channel, then you now have 2 options. You can either subscribe if you haven't already, or you can support the Pete Complete Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.